Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Glad to see so many out this morning. I know in our last deacon's meeting, Bobby was talking about the numbers for Sunday school have just really been great. And what a blessing that is to our church and to each other. And I'm just very thankful for that this morning. I wanted to briefly just introduce the new book. We've got several, I think 6 lessons coming up when things fall short. We're talking about limited resources, but a limitless God. And our first lesson today, of course, is on the mustard seed and faith. Then we have when our circumstances fall short, understanding falls short, provisions, finances, and confidence. And definitely a theme there. It seems like things that we go through that will definitely, when we think about our faith and we think about what interferes with our faith, what diminishes our faith, what gives us trouble to have the faith that we need. And I think all of those things come to mind when we think about faith. So I think the lessons will build each week as we talk about these things that in our lives that fall short, and how they affect us and how they affect our relationship with the Lord. And then it looks like we've got some really good lessons on sharing the gospel, sharing Jesus with other people a little bit later in the winter and looking on into February. So I think it's a great couple of sections here in this new book. Today we're in Matthew, and we're going to be talking about Jesus and what he had to say to the disciples as he came down off the mountain, and how he challenged them a little bit, or a lot, really, I guess you could say. But before we get into that, I just wanted to look at this in the teacher's book. It kind of talks about limited resources, but a limitless God. We oftentimes hear, I can't. I don't have enough time. I can't do this. I can't do that. My calendar's full. We're living in a very fast-paced society where things are just happening so fast, and there's so much to do, and there's this, and there's that, and there's this, and there's that. A lot of times we kind of lose that connection, and I want to talk about that a little bit later, and how that relates to faith. But oftentimes, these are the things that we hear. We don't have enough time. But what I wanted to read to you today is that in the leader's book, it says, culture thrives on a scarcity of time, money, and availability. But when confronted with the needs of a lost, weary world, so when you kind of come back and narrow that down, when we're confronted with the needs of a lost and weary world, you'll never find those excuses in the Bible. You'll never find those excuses in the red letter words in the Bible. Jesus will never say, I'm not enough. You don't have enough. You don't have enough time. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't feed your community and create a pantry. You can't make a handicap accessible bathroom. He'll never say those things.
But I like it when God comes around and says, yes, you can.
He does. He does. Jesus is truly an all-sufficient Savior who supplies everything that we need. And he longs to show us how to escape the bounds of scarcity. He longs to show us that it's not limitless, especially when we think about the lost and dying world. When we think about witnessing, when we think about doing a project for the needy, when we think about things that we do as a church, when we think about things we do as persons in our own faith, in our own journey, in our own lives, in our own hearts, there's never going to be that situation where Jesus is not enough. We can learn his way and discover that little really does become much. Little really does become much. Limited resources and limitless God. I know I've told this story before about going visiting with Lonnie. I think I've told it in Sunday school, I'm not sure. And as I was reading through this lesson and just going through my own journey, which I hope y'all understand. I know Mark does, I know Chris does, I know anybody that's ever taught does. When you sit down and study, it's like your own little journey that you're going through. You're learning, there's new things that you didn't know. I didn't know a lot about the Transfiguration. You just learn so much. It's like your own Sunday school. And it's just a blessing. Would you agree, Mark? It's just awesome. So, but going back to my story, I just kept thinking about that visit with Lonnie. There was alcohol in the home. I was nervous, and we get there, and immediately the dogs come to the screen door, which they'd already mutilated the door. The door wasn't going to hold these ferocious dogs. And Lonnie didn't hesitate. Opened that car door. I said, Lonnie, don't you think maybe we should wait a minute? Maybe we should just take a minute, you know? And, but I looked over again, and he was halfway up there. And I, you know, my own faith and my own this journey and this lesson, I just kept going back to that and thinking, you know, it just takes a little to make a big difference. And, how important, going back to what I said about teaching, and how it's your own personal little journey when you're studying and learning, how it just makes you more confident, you know, to experience those things and to learn more about yourself and learn more about Jesus in your own heart. Anyway, I wanted to share those things. So no matter how hard we try, we probably won't ever fully understand these complex situations in our lives, these things that limit our faith. Situations, family, sorrow, death, guilt, all these things, you know, in our life that interfere with our faith. No matter how hard we try to trust God, there will be times our faith will fall short, like in this lesson today, like it did with the disciples. But those are not times to give up. Those are times to do what? Look up. Look up. Pray.
I think Sheila gave up one time when the dog shoot a big old hole out in her bedroom door. He chewed that hole that I bet you that hole's that big.
My dog story reminded me of that, didn't it? Our faith falls short, but we have to look up. We have to continue to look up, because that's where we're going to find it. We're not going to find it in anything else.
We often try to do it ourselves first, though.
Self-confidence. And that's where this story goes. I'm sure y'all read that, but I don't want to spoil that, but we'll get into that in just a second. But, let me pray just real quickly. If you bow your heads, thank you, Lord, for this day. Thank you so much for allowing me to dig deeper and to get stronger. Lord, I think that's a prayer we can all pray. If we really dig deeper and be closer. Lord, thank you for that. Thank you for this church. Thank you for this day. Thank you for this lesson. It's in your name we pray. In your life connection, I'm not sure which page that I didn't grab a personal guide. I just grabbed the leader's guide. But the life connection showing that empty tank. I don't know, I can picture Jason talking about that right now. I'm sure that he's gotten into a lot of farm vehicles that the boys have parked that were empty on gas. Yeah, right on fumes. There's this view, that you know, if one has enough faith that anything can be accomplished. If I have enough, and that's what I wrote in my notes. If I have enough, well, maybe I need more. Maybe I need to do something more. Maybe I need to pray harder. Maybe I need to. I. Where's the fault in that? Carlotta was right on top of it.
It's sometimes you might say, well, if I have to go to God for everything, does that not make me weak and weak in faith? But
Makes you
no,
stronger.
it's like it says right here, a faith that looks to Jesus is the power of faith.
Yes, and that is our point.
Yeah.
That's right. The faith that looks to Jesus is a powerful faith. It is the most powerful faith. That's where we get it. That's where we look for it. That is the mustard seed, right? That is what we need. We need Jesus for our faith. And it's not I, and it's not, well, I should be more. I can accomplish this if I go to church, or if I do this, or if I do that. It wrongly places the emphasis on the one that's believing. It wrongly puts the emphasis on me, or you, or anybody. Such false belief misses the point of faith. The power of faith comes from the one in whom we are placing in our faith. Placing our faith in. That's what we should have said. He is more than enough even to move mountains. I want to ask you this too, and then come back to it. Who is Jesus to you? And let's just keep that in the back of our minds, and we'll come back to that, because I feel like the teachings that I've had over the years, that's kind of something that just kept coming up in my mind as I was thinking about faith. You know, what? Sometimes the mustard seed verses it's a little hard. It's like, I just need a little bit, but I need more. It's like a contradiction almost, but just bear with me and keep that in the back of your mind.
Well, when you have that mustard seed, you got to water it with the word so it will grow.
You know, we think of Jesus most of all as our Savior, but I like to think of him as my friend. That I catch myself all the time just looking at him as a friend, because it's just something or someone that you can go to at all times. Never lets you down. So I just think that's the best definition.
Let's come back to that.
Okay.
The Transfiguration. I don't think we can read the verses and go through this lesson without reading about the Transfiguration. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. So I'm going to read Matthew 17, starting with verse 1. And after 6 days, Jesus taketh Peter, James, and John, his brother, and bringeth them up into a high mountain apart, and was transfigured before them. And his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was as white as the light. And behold, there appeared unto them Moses and Elias, talking with them. Then answered Peter, and said unto Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If thou wilt, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for thee, one for Moses, and one for Elias. While he yet spake, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. And behold, a voice out of the cloud which said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear ye him. I feel like that should have an exclamation. Hear ye him. And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their face, and they were sore afraid. And Jesus came and touched them and said, Arise, and be not afraid. And when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no man save Jesus only. And as they came down from the mountain, Jesus charged them, saying, Tell the vision to no man until the Son of Man be risen again from the dead. And the disciples asked him, saying, Why then say the scribes that Elias must first come? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Elias truly shall first come and restore all things. But I say unto you that Elias is come already, and they knew him not, but have done unto him whatsoever they listed. Likewise shall also the Son of Man suffer of them. Then the disciples understood, and he spake unto them of John the Baptist. I wish that I could be more scholarly. I wish that I could understand this further. And I would love for Lonnie to speak on this if he has a thought about this in the lesson. But I just want to focus for a minute on faith and what this did for me. And just think. You might even close your eyes if you want to. And just think of this moment. Think of these three disciples seeing Jesus, this man that walked the earth with them and did these wonderful miracles. They were very, very early beginning to understand who Jesus was, but in my mind, I'm sure had doubts, right? I'm sure. And they get to see Jesus in all of his glory and majesty, the bright light, the raiment shining like white, something they had never seen and probably never saw again until he came back, right? Just imagine that for just a second. It's just amazing. And then, on top of that, not only get to see Jesus like that, but get to hear the voice of God speak. For me, this did something to my faith. It I won't say secured it, but I feel like sometimes as I go through life and see things happen to people and read terrible news, which I try to stay away from, but it's just everywhere. The feelings of mourning when you lose someone special, and just all these hardships and things that happen to us in this walk. But this moment right here, for me, just did something. It rattled me a little bit, and it really made me think about what I truly believe and what Jesus truly is for me. Made it more real, made it just that experience that these humans had, these people on earth had, to see this and to think that I'm going to get to see that one day. I don't know. I felt like not only does it set the stage for the lesson and what really the meat of the lesson is, but to me it really did something to my faith. And if you haven't, maybe go back and read it again on your own and just really focus on that.
Well, Jeff, you were talking about Jesus, and at that time, we need to remember that he walked as man, so all the emotions, the worry, the doubt, the fear, the hurt, he felt all these things. He knows them. And I think that's one way he can minister to each and every one of us more.
Lonnie, do you have anything to add about the transfiguration that might help us with our faith and think about this lesson about faith?
This is a portion. These men were told that Jesus was going to be here, that he would be risen from the dead, but it was like it just didn't sink in. This is something that's always been there for me. They are says there, you know, don't tell anybody what you've seen until I'm risen from the dead. But yet, when the crucifixion happens, these men are running and hiding because they don't, you know, so they were just like us. Their faith was, you know, and so.
Well, they didn't truly believe until they seen him in the room when he come to them.
Yeah, and so, you know, it's a really, and it's a really hard lesson for us to learn when it comes to this thing of faith. It is, and but you know, the lesson is that we need to really pay close attention to what Jesus has said to us and hang on to each and every little word. And it doesn't take much. You know, that faith of a mustard seed is real. That's real. You know, the fact of the matter is that God says He gives us a measure of faith. It's not big amounts that it takes. We're probably not going to be able to brag about the faith that we have, but the faith that we have is enough if we'll use it. If we'll use it. And I don't know. The thing that's always amazed me is that Jesus tells them that, and it's just like it's a bomb dropped. John the Baptist is Elias.
I just wanted to make sure I was clear with
Yeah.
that. That's one thing. I didn't want to say it and it be wrong. That would be very embarrassing. That's the way I read it. That's who John the Baptist was. Another thing, just about the setting in the leader book, and maybe is in your book, it talks about Moses and Elijah representing the law and the prophets, and then God says, almost, He doesn't say this in the book, but He said, but now listen to Jesus, or follow Jesus. Things have changed a little bit, but they've changed for you, so that you can have all this freedom of coming to me, and Jesus is going to take all of this for you. I thought that was a neat thing that the leader book and maybe your book talked about. And if you really like, I don't know about y'all, but when I read these things like this, these descriptors of these events, in your mind you kind of go there. Peter's like, hey, I know what? I'll build us a shelter real quick. And then all of a sudden this big cloud comes in, and God starts speaking. He wanted to do something, right? And that a lot of us were the doers, I'll go over here and fix this, and yeah, let me do that. They're like, no, you're missing the point here. I thought that was, I could imagine him, let me do this, let me do that.
Even with all of that happening, their faith was still very weak.
Very weak. And so I think in our lesson today, in our verses, when Jesus does start condemning everyone, He's talking to all of them. He's not just talking to the ones that were there not able to heal the child. He's talking to all of them after just coming off the mountain, after just showing him who He really is and telling him what was going to happen. He still had to scold them.
Their faith didn't grow really strong until after He had done ascended and they started doing their ministry work.
Which is what we'll talk about when we talk about who Jesus is to us. And then the last part of the scene, the setting that it talks about is just gives you You know, that when Jesus comes off the mountain, this is a chaotic thing happening. You've got the scribes over here bad-mouthing the disciples, and you know, lay people standing around, you know, and then this father grieving, and so that you know, I like to really think about what's really going on at the moment when we read these verses. So let's do that. Let's read the first verses, 14 through 16 in Matthew 17, and talk about those for just a second. Verse 14, and when they were come to the multitude, there came to him a certain man, kneeling down to him, and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is lunatic, and sore vexed, for oft times he falleth into the fire, and oft into the water. And I brought him to thy disciples, and they could not cure him. So we talked about, just a few minutes ago, we talked about leaning on ourselves and our self-confidence. When we become Christians and we go out into the world and we have this new faith and new heart, and we're this new person, we come to church for several years, 20 years, 30 years, and we hear pastors say, you know, listen up, you know, this is not just for the dying world out there, this is for all of us. When we get those thoughts, or we read something or feel something or see something and we think, oh, that was for me, you know, that was for me. Sometimes we get caught up in that self-confidence. One thing I thought of, and maybe someone here said it, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing to say, but I know how this ends. I've read the back of the book. I know how this ends. So why do I have to do all this stuff in between? I thought about that. I thought about that. The disciples walking around going, yeah, we got the power. We can heal people. We can do whatever. You know, maybe after a little time they started believing in who? Themselves. And they come to this one event where this young man and all the signs and symptoms described here make us think of epilepsy. It talks about that in our book. And maybe they just walked up there with a head held high. Oh, we got this. We've been doing this. And what happened?
Their faith wasn't strong enough.
They were focused on themselves. They were focused on the task. Do we ever do that? Do we get focused on the task? We do it at church. We do it here, of all places. I'm trying to think of an example, but we get focused on those little details. We get focused on the timeline. How often do we do that?
Andrew's a perfect example.
Do you have
Maintaining the schedule.
Yeah.
You know, instead of just looking to the ones who are coming in seeking. Being able to minister to them.
here's the food. You know, here it is. Have a good day. We focus on the task. I just think of so many things when I get into this. Another thing I thought about was the parent of this young man. And I never really thought about, I mean, maybe I have at some point of a parent with a person with a disability. And, you know, a lot of times, where does your compassion go? To the child, right? To the child. But think of all the things that parents are going through to care for and to see that child's needs are met. And I often feel like in my own life I don't give them enough compassion and help. something that I haven't experienced firsthand, but I've worked with people. And one of the neatest things I got to do recently is there's this really cool group called Waypoint Adventures, and they're creating and purchasing and getting grant money to buy on-trail wheelchairs for folks with disabilities. So I got to go to a training, and for the first half we learned about certain things about the group, and then we got to practice with the empty chairs and how they worked, and some had brakes and some didn't, and some had different ways of strapping folks in. And the last part of the class, clients came from a group home, and we got to take them out on the trail. Now, you're talking about an experience.
I say that was probably a very humbling experience.
Very. They turned me loose with a young man strapped in a 3-wheelchair with no brake on a lakeside trail at Lake James. And I was about as nervous as I was going to that house. I am solely responsible for this person right now. I mean, they're strapped in, and what if I fall, and what if I go too fast, and what
ifs?
Yeah, those doubt, to work on your faith. But what an experience that was. That gave me a little more understanding of what folks go through.
Was he only physically handicapped?
He was physically handicapped, and he could speak some. And we would talk, and we got to the lake view, and I said, "Isn't that beautiful?" And he said, "Yeah," And he couldn't have got there without that chair. It was remarkable. I hope the state keeps pushing that and getting some money to get those folks out there, because it's very important. But what about the faith of those folks taking care of us?
Just like I was when I first started babysitting. It wasn't money that was involved, it was the love I gave the kids when they didn't have nobody to love them.
Their faith is tested in so many ways, and I know y'all know that. We think about it. So imagine those challenges that this parent was facing. The teacher's book talks about how he showed so much reverence by kneeling down and saying, "Jesus, please help this child."
The desperation of the parent.
There was a lot of desperation there. "Lord, have mercy on my son," it says. By using this term, the father likely meant nothing more than to show respect for Jesus. We talked about the signs and things of we think of as epilepsy. And just the part about keeping him out of the water and out of the fire, and I'm sure that there had been, life-threatening situations where his son has almost died. Constant red alert of being with this person and being solely responsible for him.
One thing that crosses my mind is how many times did they ask God why?
And what's that do to your faith? It could help it at a certain time.
I believe it can, yeah.
Yeah, but there could be those down times where you're just asking and asking and asking and not getting feeling like you're not getting a response, or you're not in God's time. The disappointed father explained that the disciples had failed to heal his son. So Jesus commissioned them, to do this, to cast out these demons and to cure disease and illnesses. Imagine what it felt like to finally get to the disciples, and then the disciples couldn't do it. Imagine the anxiety and the distress that the father felt. How did that test his faith?
I'm wondering how many times in the Bible, especially the New Testament, it has ye of little faith. It has to be a whole lot of times.
And you wonder if this father, when he saw the disciples couldn't do anything, wondered if there was a reason to go to Jesus.
And what if he hadn't? What if, well, I might as well just go on back home?
If Jesus' disciples can't do it, maybe there's a problem with Jesus too.
And that's what the scribes were chatting about, right?
Yeah.
You know, they were saying, well, see, he's not who he says he is. So that was creating all of this discourse. So what happens in Matthew 17 and 18? Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him hither to me. And Jesus rebuked the devil and he departed out of him. And the child was cured from that very hour. Two things kind of in these verses. Number one, Jesus is scorning everybody. How could you not have faith to do this? How long am I going to be with you? When we see people, even believers, trying to be self-reliant as they work on problems, trying to orchestrate miracles on their own, not when, but we do see people, we do see believers doing this. And we talked about that a few minutes ago. We talked about that self-confidence that we get in ourselves and not relying on the one who gives us the faith. Shame can creep in when we don't really bring it to Jesus because we think it's too big, too small, too messy, or too late. This right here starts getting into that personal relationship and what did I wanted you to think about. And Janet hit on it, Carlotta hit on it a little bit. Is who is Jesus to you, and why is that important to our faith? If Jesus was to the disciples this Savior, the person, the Son of God that he said he was, then who is he? And they lose a little bit. They lose faith. They concentrate on themselves. Who is he to you, and why does that matter in your faith? For some people, they don't have that personal relationship. And when we try to be self-reliant and that doesn't work, when we try to orchestrate these miracles all by ourselves, then we start really doubting because shame creeps in. We think it's too big to take to Jesus. We think it's such a little thing to take to Jesus. We think whatever we think. We postpone because of our stubbornness. We're afraid. So we choose to go at it alone. So if Jesus is this friend, if you have this personal relationship with him, and that he is in your heart, somebody that you talk to, he's somebody that you believe in, he's somebody that you've incorporated in every aspect of your life, whether that's hopefully church, home, work, out in the woods, out on the farm, in the city. If you have incorporated him in everything in your life, and he is your best friend, because you know what he did for you, you've accepted that, and you believe in him, then why wouldn't you take the little steps? Why wouldn't you have the right amount of faith for every situation? Now I realize we're human and we're going to fail but we have to get back up. We have to get back up and remember who he is and to us. And how do we do that? How do we do that? How do we keep him the center of everything?
You put him there.
Put him there.
He's got to be first of everything.
How many times have we heard it? It starts with us in here. I know I've heard it many times. It starts with us in here. It starts with Jeff reading his lesson. It starts with Jeff getting excited about the transfiguration these disciples getting to see Jesus for who he really was, instead of the guy walking down the road in a robe healing people. It's doing stuff with your church family. It's your prayer life. It's your Bible reading. It's the way you act in public, with your family, with your friends, with yourself. It's all of those things that make us closer to him, so that he can be our best friend, and that little bit of mustard seed is all we need.
When you put Jesus first, that all happens.
But it takes all of that, and we're gonna drop, we're gonna stumble, but it takes all of that.
You see God in everything, in every situation, but our sin nature takes over. A lot of times we go back to I and try to handle things without His.
Our nature is to believe that if we could fix things ourselves, we would somehow be more righteous and accepted. But the opposite is true. If we are unwilling to relinquish our control, we will never experience the intimacy we so desperately need. I think sometimes that word intimacy throws me off a little bit. I'm just going to be honest about that. But when you really think about who Jesus is in that personal, intimate, personal relationship, that he is in everything that you do. He's the person you're thinking about in the car. He's the music you're listening to. He's the friends you have. He's all of that. I think that's where that intimate, personal relationship comes
He
from.
wants to be the love of your life.
Yes.
But he knows what you're gonna ask for before you even ask. He knows
Yeah.
all about you.
And he already knows.
He knows everything.
And then the second part of those verses was the power. The pure, instant power that Jesus had to rebuke the spirit and to heal that child.
It's all about.
He has all power.
Yeah, there's one in here that talks about if we try to do anything outside the bounds of God's kingdom, it will not go well. It's like trying to fell a tree with a chainsaw, forgetting to start the engine.
You ever seen somebody do that with a chainsaw? They think it's gonna, they think if you move the chainsaw back and forth, it helps it. I've decided in my almost 7th year of being a ranger and being out in the woods, that I need to start backing off on the chainsaw a little bit. I just about got whacked the other day with a dead tree. It was so scary. Trees are so scary. You think it's like, oh, I know where that tree's gonna go, and it goes the other way.
Just like situations, we think we know how a situation will transpire. Unless we have God in it, we have no idea.
That's right. This power of Jesus. As soon as the boy arrived, Jesus commanded the demon to leave with a sharp rebuke and moved to bring the exorcism a speedy conclusion. Just as when Jesus rebuked the wind and the waves, resulting in the immediate calm of the sea, that's in Matthew 8:26. He rebuked the demon from this child and immediately was gone. Immediately abandoned the boy. It was so powerful that people in the crowd thought the child was dead. And they get that from Mark 9:26. Jesus' authority over the demon contrasted the inability of the disciples to perform the exorcism. So his immediate almighty power was the direct opposite of the disciples over there with no faith that just didn't have it together. And I think that's what God wanted the people to see, and that's what God wants us to see in this lesson. If we don't have what we need, if we don't have all of those things that we talked about with Jesus, we can't rely on that mustard seed of faith if we don't have all those things. And then here they come, right? 19 and 20, here they come. Then came the disciples to Jesus apart and said, "Why could not we cast him out?" And Jesus said unto them, "Because of your unbelief. For verily I say unto you, if ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, Ye shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. It doesn't take much faith. It all hinges on our connection with God. And that's what I wanted to try to describe to you about that personal relationship. Who is Jesus to you? Is he all of those things? And if he's not, maybe that's something you can work on. Maybe that's something Jeff needs to work on. Because if he's not all of those things and you don't have him enveloped all the way around, almost like a circle, then that faith, you're going to feel like your faith needs to be bigger. My faith needs to be bigger. I need to do more. I need to do this. I need to do that. And there you're going to be, jumping around again, like the disciples, running to Jesus. Why isn't this working? Why can't I do this? So when we think about it, think about that. Think about one area today. Think about all of the things we mentioned. Work, home, prayer life, church life. Is there something missing that is decreasing your faith, that's stumbling you in your faith, that's making you feel like you gotta have more than a mustard seed? And I really think that'll help all of us. I know it's gonna help me. In our Live It Out section, we can pray, we can engage, and we can dare. We can pray. What challenges are you going to face this week? Is it just getting to work? Is it getting to school? Is it taking care of the kids? Make a list and pray for faith to deal with all of these issues. Engage. We all have experienced difficult situations and broken people. It's sometimes easier to try to avoid them, but in the perfect setting for that story I told about me and Lonnie. Commit to engage actively with these complicated problems rather than avoid them. Face them, but don't face them alone. You know who to go to. And then the dare one, perhaps you stop believing, a breakthrough is possible with something in your life, or a sickness, or anything. And maybe you stop praying about it. Maybe you've given up on somebody's salvation. Ask Jesus to change your posture from the doubt to the faith, and commit to re-engage by taking your request to God. Just remember, a faith that looks to Jesus is a powerful faith, and that should see us through. Anybody have anything to add?
Especially like there on page 22, it says, bring everything to him, even when it's a mess. He specializes in messes and impossibilities. One thing it said is, sometimes you look for an answer to a prayer for years.
Don't give up. I think that's the dare part, that living it out. Just go back to it. Love y'all.